They think that you want to use my whole name against me. Mike, listen, man, if you can't say the name, it's Abdurrahman, keep the name out your damn mouth.
I couldn't think of another example where you actually had a Democratic candidate who was down at least 4 points. And it turns out for this entire century, Abdul El-Sayed is the only one in a poll that meets CNN standards for publication.
So with Labor Day rapidly approaching and general election season now more or less upon us, I don't think it should exactly be much of a surprise to find out that Islamic communist Abdul Mohammed Al-Sayed, which is how he has asked us to pronounce his name, is not looking that good. As a matter of fact, he's polling worse than any Michigan Democrat has in this entire century. Now, certainly take that with a grain of salt, because I think if we learned anything from this past primary season, it's that polls are rather unreliable right now and not to be trusted. However, on the flip side, what I would point out is we just witnessed the polls massively overestimate the support of DSA communist candidates, both in Wisconsin and in Michigan, with Al-Sayed, where he was projected to win by double digits, barely pulled off the victory by 1 point. So I'd also note that if that logic carries over to the election and that sampling error carries over, it should indicate that actually Abdul is doing even worse than these polls are saying. However, certainly don't just blindly believe that, because you still never know. That's why you gotta go vote. But certainly when we factor in the actual primary results that we saw in these Rust Belt states, and hey, if that sizable of a chunk of the Democrat electorate doesn't want to embrace the DSA, and we consider independent voters massively disfavor socialism by double digits in a general election, Al-Sayed's going to have to win with a lot more than just the college towns, because it's not just the Democrat electorate anymore. The news doesn't look all that good, which is certainly refreshing. Now, on the flip side, I think it's also important to point out that Trump and the Republican Party not only are enjoying a massive cash advantage over the DNC, which will, of course, allow a lot of the advertising, a lot of the campaigning, and ultimately the messaging there to hit home. But it does appear now we're getting more details of what this RNC convention is going to look like. Basically, they're trying to do a midterm year RNC. And what's hilarious is because of the fact that Democrats have chosen such horrendous candidates with such a horrendous past, they're basically revealing the whole concept of this RNC is we're just going to play the words of these people, right? We're just going to highlight the actual quotations of people like Al-Sayed, Tallarico, and many more, and say, guys, this is the Democrat Party. We're going to put that on national broadcast when everyone's watching, and well, that will basically be our message, right? So there you go. That's how it's done. But anyways, let's talk about all of it, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with all of that in mind, so the latest DSA Hassan Piker Marxist excuse that we've heard for these underperformances that we just witnessed, right? For Al-Sayed, Francesca Hong in those elections is basically that, oh, well, we were going to win by a lot, but the Democrat establishment came and screwed us over, right? They brainwashed the Democrat primary voter base. This is kind of what the excuse that they always give. But no, seriously, deep down, our ideas are popular. But because of the DNC playing its games, okay, that's why they underperformed. Well, when you look at the last 5 Michigan Senate polls, for example, it doesn't seem to be true that, oh, the Democrat establishment just set up a political machine and tried to get people to turn out. I mean, sure, it's true to some extent. They do try to rig their own primaries, but it's also a question of maybe your ideas just aren't popular with voters, right? Have you ever considered that? Have you considered that, outside your little bubble where everyone is basically a freak, the general electorate finds you to be off-putting? Well, we look, for example, to the last 5 Michigan Senate polls and take a look, for example. So the Fox News poll that came out has Mike Rogers up by 4. Another one here +3. SoCal Strategies up +1. Glenn Gariff Group, this one has it all the way Mike Rogers +10. And you might sit there and say, well, that's certainly not a lot, to which I say, yeah, I mean, obviously, we ideally should live in a country where communists don't get any votes, but this is what we're dealing with. But the reason why this is significant, folks, is I think we ought to remember, this is still Michigan, and this is the summertime. So if you know where I'm going with that, although Trump has carried Michigan twice, arguably 3 times, but we'll say twice, historically, of all of those Rust Belt blue wall states, Michigan has been the bluest, right? The last time a Republican has won a statewide election in Michigan, not exactly sure, but it doesn't happen that often, right? Historically, you look at Senate races, governor races, this stuff is reliably blue. And a lot of that has to do historically with the union machines and all that stuff. So, and by the way, it's summertime, which is historically when Democrats have that polling advantage. And then, after Labor Day, Republican voters kind of wake up and pick up the phone more, and et cetera, et cetera. So all of that said, if we're to use any historical precedent here, which again, maybe take that with a grain of salt because it's hard to trust these polls, but do understand this is actually a historically very, very good place, like unprecedented in the 21st century for Republicans to be polling. By the way, that's significantly better, for example, than Trump was even polling in Michigan in the year of 2024. So taking it with a grain of salt, believing maybe the idea that we also saw the tangible real life evidence in the Democrat primary that yes, the DSA has electoral problems on their hands. Maybe this shouldn't be surprising, but take a listen here for more of those details.
In Senate, Rogers versus El-Sayed. Look at this, a new Fox News poll. Rogers is actually up by 4 points. He's up by 4 points. It's close, but a Republican is ahead in Michigan. And why? Why? What is going on? Look among independents. Rogers actually leads by 5. This is extremely unusual because across the political map, as I was looking at these different Fox News polls, I couldn't find another example where the Republican was actually leading among independents. And it turns out that candidate quality may in fact matter, at least in terms of how voters see it, because in this same poll, the Democratic candidate for governor was ahead. So this is unique to the Senate race, and it is quite a troubling result for Democrats and quite a heartening one for Republicans.
So do you have a sense then, Harry, of what it is that is contributing to the struggles, right, that Abdul El-Sayed is? Is it that Rogers is a stronger candidate, or is it that El-Sayed has more issues for voters to deal with?
It is all about Abdul El-Sayed. He is a weak candidate, at least by the metrics that we normally look at. And you can just take a look here. Okay, the net favorability rating of the Dem Senate candidates across these northern battlegrounds. You'll notice there's only one candidate, Ren, one who has an unfavorable rating higher than his favorable rating, and it is significantly higher. Look how far underwater Abdul El-Sayed is. He is 13 points underwater, under their Lake Michigan. My goodness gracious.
Yeah, so I think the numbers basically speak for themselves, assuming that it actually plays out that way in reality, which hopefully it does. But if you're wondering, by the way, why does El-Sayed have any support at all? Or where is that coming from? Well, folks, I think the crosstabs of the Fox News poll that had Rogers up by 4 really tell you the story, okay? Because when you break it down by race, gender, college education, things like that, well, kind of summarizes modern American politics, doesn't it? So among white voters, for example, shout out white people, Mike Rogers, Johnny America, as we call him, is up by 14, right? He's winning 56-42. Among non-white voters, though, and you wonder, by the way, why are Democrats so fixated on this mass immigration thing, right? Why is it they will never cave a single inch on even basic issues such as having a secure border or, a reasonable control on the amount of people who come in the country, deporting criminal, illegal alien sex predators, even things like that? Like, why are they so extreme on immigration, even when it might lose them popularity in the immediate, because this is the long-term game, okay? Look at the state of Michigan. What kind of people especially comprise the non-white population of that state, especially the immigrant populations? Where were those people coming from? Do they share values and names like Abdul El-Sayed? I think you know the answer to that question, which is exactly why among non-white voters, Abdul El-Sayed is winning by 42 points. That is right. 70-28, So a lot of times they'll say this is a conspiracy theory or whatever, and then it's like they kind of just admit that's the entire point of this, which, might be politically incorrect to say or whatever, but that's kind of true. That's kind of how it goes, okay? But anyways, okay. So we have that. Among men, by the way, Mike Rogers is up 55-44, so he's leading by about 11 points there. Among women, Abdul El-Sayed up by +1, and among white women with a college degree, aka the woke hippies, El-Sayed is up by 23 points. So, you look at these two, right? Non-white, white woman with college degree, and that basically summarizes the whole thing we've explained in the Democrat coalition. You have the woke, you have the third world. The woke is actually a very small minority of society, so they have to import the third world to fill the ranks and gain political support. And then you have these two right here, right? the woke feminist hippies, woke LGBT feminist hippies, getting behind Abdul El-Sayed, which is sort of an Eve biting the apple type of thing. It's not unprecedented that this has happened throughout history. For example, there's a very famous photo of the Iranian Revolution. And if you know anything about the Iranian Revolution, there was two things going on. There was the student revolution, and they kind of wanted to have a, I don't know, progressive liberal democracy. And then you have the Ayatollah, right? You have the Islamic radicals. And there's a famous photo, actually. You can go search it on Google or something, where these two women, they're not Muslim, they're not wearing the burqa or anything. Okay, they're literally this, right? Women with college degrees. They were part of the student revolution. Two female students holding up pictures of the Ayatollah because liberation from Western white people or something like that. Sound familiar, by the way, right? So in the name of anti-imperialism, let's embrace the third world jihadism. And this is progressive, right, guys? And then what happens next? I mean, you could probably venture to guess what ultimately the fate of those progressive college students in Iran ended up being. But, it's sort of, we watch the same thing happen over and over again. Anyways, there you have that. But now let's talk about the electoral message, sort of the other counter maneuver against these people that we have saved up, because Trump this year has announced something I found to be very creative and innovative. I don't know why it hasn't been done before. But basically, he wants to do the RNC for the midterms, in the same sense that if like on presidential year, they do that big convention, it's broadcast all over national TV, and it's kind of a big publicity moment to clarify what their party's all about, and it sort of rallies people, and it is compelling to independent voters, all that stuff. Well, the Republicans want to do that this year in the state of Texas, particularly for the midterms, and they're planning to do this basically after Labor Day, so that way they can maximize early vote turnout, especially given that we're the incumbent party. That's what we need, right? We need our voters to be energized and turned out. And so, yes, a very effective convention that sort of taps our people back in. Definitely a great ace card we have up our sleeve. Combine that, by the way, of course, with the massive cash advantage that particularly Republican Party committees, RNC, aka and super PACs on the Republican side have a massive cash advantage because basically the Democrats are broke. We've been talking about that extensively. But likewise, as it pertains to that very convention, I want you to take a listen to these details because, to make a long story short, we have been handed a gift and we plan to use it. So take a listen here. So, driving the news, Republicans will make progressive politicians and activists the recurring characters. Basically, we're going to do a convention all about these people in particular throughout the September 9th to 10th convention at the American Airlines Center over in Dallas. GOP operatives finally doing something competent. Can you believe it? Republicans understanding smart politics for 2 seconds. Spent months compiling footage of Democrat figures, including left-wing commentator Hassan Piker, yeah, he's going to be covered everywhere, and Texas U.S. Senate candidate James Tallarico, that they'll use throughout the convention to paint Democrats as outside the mainstream. So kind of following, actually, the very strategy we used in the State of the Union, which is these people are crazy. Anyone remember that? Well, now we just were provided a lot more of that metaphorical ammunition because, in their infinite wisdom, we have prominent Democrat, I should say, Senate candidates who rallied alongside Hassan Piker all the way up until basically general election season. We know the past record of lunatics like James Tallarico and what they've said. But by the way, Abdul El-Sayed is now the leading figure in one of America's most important Senate races. So I'm sure he's going to make it plenty into this as well. But anyways, quote, "Our video trove is endless," a convention source told Axios. And by the way, how fitting is it that all we have to do, clearly, by the way, look at the primary results. DSA can deny it all they want, but all we have to do to discredit these people in the eyes of the American public is not even necessarily make our own argument. I'm sure that will be done, but basically just show the words, air the words of these very people, because what they're currently desperately, of course, trying to do is do the whole rebrand and say, oh no, we're sensible moderates, right? AOC, ha ha ha, that was woke one. And, probably assuming and playing on the fact that most voters have the memory of a goldfish. So we have that though, right? This is the counter. Just literally air a national thing on TV that a lot of people are going to watch and just play these people's own words. There you go. Display that they are crazy to normal people, because if you're not that in tune with politics, you might not know the full internet history of Abdul El-Sayed. All you got to do, ladies and gentlemen, show it to them, and normal, good Americans rightly reject these people for the absolute freaks that they are. Okay, so that's what it is.
Abdul Muhammad El-Sayed, the most radical Senate candidate in America.
Pretty dangerous.
El-Sayed pledged support for the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, a designated foreign terrorist group. He wants to hike taxes on Michigan waitresses, delivery drivers, and seniors on Social Security. He joined a sex offender and a murderer to demand the mass release of dangerous prisoners. And when his ally claimed America deserved 9/11,
America deserved 9/11, dude.
El-Sayed refused to disavow it.
I'm not here to disavow people's views.
Abdul El-Sayed, too radical, too dangerous, wrong for Michigan.
This is Texas. This is not.
There are many more than 2 biological sexes. In fact, there are 6.
This is Texas. This is not.
The American flag is such a complicated symbol for most of us.
This is Texas. This is not.
They're going to call me a radical leftist.
This is Texas. This is not.
Something that you love that's not family or friends.
I love, and just say this because it's on my mind, the trans children.
This is Texas. This is not.
Our southern border should be like our front porch. There should be a giant welcome mat out front.
This is Texas. This is not.
It is now existential that we try to reduce our meat consumption. I am proud to say that our campaign has officially become a non-meat campaign.
This is Texas. This is not.
And there you basically have it, folks. It is indeed that easy. How hilarious that the most effective strategy against these people is to simply show normal Americans what they actually say and what they actually stand for, right? And then rightfully normal Americans will say, "Get out of my country, you freak," right? That's all we have to do. We just have to allow them to not obfuscate and try to hide their own sincere ideological positions as being quote unquote woke one while running these vague campaigns on slightly rebranded slogans that really mean the exact same thing, right? But that's all you have to do, okay? These people claim that they're democratic socialists, which implies democracy. They claim that their ideas are actually massively popular with people. Okay, so in that case, by the way, why are you trying to hide your ideas? Why is Al-Sayed's campaign, for example, or people attached to it, basically admitting that the voters are stupid and we need to lie to them about what Medicare for All actually means and all this stuff, right? Let's lie, let's gaslight. Oh, because our ideas are so popular, so that's why we're not going to define our ideas or try to hide or cover up our ideas. Well, democratic socialists, the Republicans, their job ought to be to give you exactly what you want, right? Show your actual insane ideas, your communist ideas to the American people, and let's see how they feel about it. Let's see. Let's find out. But anyways, guys, there you have it. That said, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.